Hello, my name is Steve M. Nash and I'm the editor of selfhelpcollective.com, and I have something different for you today. Not a weekly wonder or monthly marvel, a story. But first, a story about the story. I was asked to share a story at a storytelling event the weekend just gone in Birmingham by international storyteller Cat Wetherill on the theme of fur and fin. And I racked my brain to think of what could I talk about to do with fur and fin, and the only thing I could come up with was a story about a dog. So that's what I did. I wrote the story, shared it with Kat. She loved it on paper, and I wrote it down, revised it, memorised it, spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours memorising it. And then I shared my story last Sunday. Now, the thing is, I'm not really big on stories anyway, and I'll save the reason why for another video. I read novels every now and then, but I don't particularly care for stories. But unfortunately, stories are a great way of getting an idea across, and that's why I'm sharing my story in this video. But I'm not really that big into stories, and I guess also I'm not really a storyteller. And there's a certain way of sharing a story, of telling, that I pretty much didn't really manage to achieve when I shared my story. It was more a preachy story or a preachy speech. But it was fun. It was fun, and I only forgot my lines once, right at the beginning. I froze for about sort of 10 seconds, and then I carried on. And I'm going to read this like I'm reading a story, but I might be able to do it without reading it. We'll see. Anyway, the story is called Dog Days. Dog Days. If it fades out, then I will have forgotten and I'll be scrambling to my notes. But hopefully it won't. But I'm going to fade out now, and then I'll clear my throat, and then we will begin. Okay? Enjoy. I grew up with a dog. His name was Simba, and I loved him. And I'd like to tell you a story about Simba. A ripping yarn about his life and stuff, where the dog gets the bone. But I don't tell stories like that. I tell them like this. A monologue with metaphors and stuff, where we get to come home. And his story is really my story. True story too, if ever a story can be true. But the reason I'm telling it here on video, pulled deep from within the forgotten recesses, is because this story is really your story. A story about who you truly are. So, I grew up with a dog. His name was Simba, and I loved him. When I was 3, Simba was 3. When I was 6, Simba was 6. When I was 10, he was 10. 14, he was 14. But when I was 15, Simba was dead. It's not like I can remember much about my time growing up with Simba. Funnily enough, those first 15 years. I can't think of adventures and scrapes we got into, though I'm sure we spent a lot of time together. In fact, there's really only 3 things I can remember now, when I cast my mind back. I sort of remember what he looks like. I remember loving him, and I remember the day he died. Simba was coffee-coloured, medium-sized and lean. Like me. He was a collie, I think, crossed with some other breed of dog. A mongrel. Like me. And he had this deathless passion for chasing cars up and down the high street. Not like me. Now Simba lived in the glory days for a dog, the 70s, where you could crap on the pavements, crap on the streets, crap in the fields. You could crap anywhere you wanted to as a dog in the 70s. And as for dog leads, why would you need one of those? No, you could roam on the pavement, roam on the streets, roam in the fields. You could do anything you wanted to do back then as a dog. You could even chase cars. And we lived next to a main road, didn't we? The main road in the area, Cowlersley Lane. We lived in this council estate in Cowlersley Huddersfield, which is in West Yorkshire, England. The end corner terrace of an end of a row of terraced houses. We had two large gardens that covered the back, side and front of the house, both of which were separated from the main road by a 5-foot wall. Easily barrier enough, you'd think, for Simba and his fast car fixation. But these were the 70s, remember? These were the glory days. So we did little to stop Simba from escaping out the garden, out into the road, where he was free to roam, free to crap, and free to chase cars. And when I say chase cars, I mean chase cars. He'd watch cars go up the road, and he'd growl. He'd watch them go down the road, and he'd bark. And occasionally, he'd just decide to run after the Ford Cortina thing, legs turning as fast as they could. The first time Simba got run over, he just plain ran into this car, just bounced off it. Blood everywhere, a gory mess. But Simba bounced back, fit and feisty as ever. We'd shout at Simba to stop doing that, obviously, to stop chasing the cars. Simba! We'd shout, Simba! But he always ignored us, strangely, and off he'd run. So it came as no surprise one day when I heard the screech of tyres, a sickening yelp. A motorcyclist had run Simba over, some guy that worked down the chippy. And Simba was killed instantly. Bam! I remember being real cross at the time at the stupid motorcyclist that ran Simba over and killed him. He must just have been driving too fast, I remember thinking to myself. I had no sympathy at all for the fact that he'd come off his bike or anything. Bloody stupid man and his stupid bike. Served him right. Grrr. All I could think of was my beloved dog, dead. A gaping wound so bad that I could see the blood of his insides, thick and clotted and dark. I don't remember much of my 15 years or so growing up with Simba, but I remember that day, him lying there, a lifeless lump. My mum and stepdad buried him that day in the back garden. I think they must have. I grew up with a dog. His name was Simba, and I loved him. I grew up with Simba in my earliest years, before I'd learnt to distinguish between the different types of love. You know, loves like friendship, sibling, romantic, parental, unconditional love. I only knew love to be love. So I grew up loving Simba, and now I love all dogs. Even those that have bitten me, I love them. The two Alsatian dogs that charged me on 2 separate occasions, barking and snarling and angry. I just stood there, even though I wanted to run. Stood still until they'd stopped their charge. I love them. The rescue dog, frightened and confused by life, whose instinct is to bite first, ask questions later. I love it. I love dogs, and love will always be my instinctive response whenever I meet one. But the animal love doesn't stop there, no. I love cats too, see through their seeming indifference. And goats, and pigs, and cows. I love them all. Animals have such natural grace, especially the cows. Wow. This momentum of love just keeps on growing and growing, it seems. And all because I grew up with a dog called Simba. Now, it just so happens that I don't believe in death. I used to, but now I think different. Death is simply a form of change, no more, no less. So whilst Simba is no longer physically present here on planet Earth, he is alive and kicking, here in my heart, and he always will be. So rest in peace, Simba. I miss you. It's been over 30 years since you were alive, but I miss you. Remember though, this isn't really a story about Simba, or a story about me. If it's a story at all, then it's a story about who we truly are. Thank you very much for listening to my story about my time growing up with Simba, who I miss a lot. And if it hadn't been for the storytelling event that happened April 13th, I think, in Birmingham, the Icon Gallery, Tell Me on a Sunday it was called. If it hadn't been for that storytelling event, I would never have thought to write about Simba and my love for him and the impact his life had on me. So thank you, Kat Weatherall, for asking me to tell my story, even though I really gave a speech. I learned how to tell stories before I share another story there. Thanks for watching this video anyway. Anything that comes up, anything that you want to share, please do. But thank you for watching. Goodbye.